All right, thank you everybody. My name is Mark Dahlmeyer. I will be the host and the facilitator of the webinar today. Today we're going to talk about realizing the value and impact of proactive and superior security services. So let's set the conversation up. Now, according to the Chubb Cybersecurity Index, the healthcare, manufacturing, business services, public sector, education, and information technology industries have all experienced between 200% and 3,000% growth in cyber incidents and attacks over the last 24 to 36 months. Now, we know overall globally that cyber attacks increased over 600% during the pandemic. And with this growing number of cyber attacks and data breaches across multiple industry segments, this is going to drive greater regulatory oversight and regulation rule changes that will eventually result in additional operational, technology, management, and reporting costs to organizations that are operating within or servicing those regulated industries. So with this type of massive growth of cyber attacks and increased regulatory changes underway, organizations are trying to figure out how they can implement proactive security and compliance programs and services so they can keep up with the rate of change and they can begin to reduce risks. Now, based upon some research that we've done and research from Thomson Reuters, there are 5 top cyber and compliance challenges that most organizations are facing today. Number 1, balancing budgets and managing cost increases. Over 32% of organizations surveyed expect regulatory compliance costs to increase over the next 12 to 24 months. How to handle the volume of threat, attacks, and regulatory changes that are underway. How an organization can drive demonstrable culture change and sustainable culture change within the organization. There's an increase of personal liability because of the regulatory compliance change and the threats that are occurring within these organizations. And it's a direct liability on employees and executives. And then a lot of organizations are trying to figure out how to address the change fatigue that they're going through when they have to address technology change, compliance change, policy and procedure change. So these are some of the top challenges that organizations are facing while they try to become more proactive versus reactive in terms of their cybersecurity and their compliance programs. Now, if you want to get a good understanding of the rate of change that's projected in the future, reginfo.gov is a fantastic website to go see. So reginfo.gov is from the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs of the federal government. And this website tracks the total regulatory pending actions that are under review and being voted on by the federal government. As of the beginning of this month, there were over 54 pending actions that were being voted on by the federal government. 14 of those sit underneath the healthcare organization now for the federal government. So if you think about that, healthcare as an industry from a regulatory compliance perspective is really focused on HIPAA as the main regulation. So the Health and Human Services Department oversees and governs that regulatory compliance. But at this time, there were 14 different regulatory actions or changes that were being voted on. So think about that. If all 14 of those get voted yes and start getting put into practice, think about all of the downstream changes to policies, to procedures, to technologies that organizations are going to have to address going forward. So this is a great website to plug into, and it'll give you visibility in terms of, again, the regulatory actions that are currently being voted on by the federal government within the United States. Now, KPMG has published a fantastic report on the top 10 key regulatory challenges of 2021. And we're just going to cover a couple of these. But at a high level, organizations of all shapes and sizes that deal with regulatory compliance and regulatory change are trying to figure out how to get their arms around the change management associated with regulatory compliance. KPMG is suggesting that organizations use a holistic approach when it comes to regulatory compliance, and they take a lens and look at regulatory compliance through the lens of risk management. And that helps them to build operational resiliency and a culture around security and around risk management. Now, many organizations are trying to figure out what are the foundational building blocks that they need to put in place in order to build operational resiliency and a culture that's sensitive and focused on security and compliance. Most organizations are trying to brace for expanded regulations and expanded regulatory authority that will come based upon these rule changes across a number of different regulated industries. So these are some of the top challenges that organizations are trying to face and trying to deal with in terms of regulatory compliance. And the key takeaway around this is any organization that's operating within a regulated industry or that provides goods and services to regulated industry should be focused on establishing a proactive compliance program and a proactive cybersecurity program. So it's not the tail wagging the dog. So they're not being caught by surprise, so that they can predict cost and they can get ahead of the associated change management associated with these regulatory actions. At the same time, over the last 12 to 24 months, we have seen a significant increase in terms of ransomware, data breaches, hacks. Cyber criminals and hackers are leveraging COVID-19 and various topics around COVID-19, like vaccines and vaccination centers, etc., to perpetuate fraud and to perpetuate cyber breaches and cyber attacks. At the same time, there have been a significant amount of zero-day attacks and critical vulnerabilities announced by various manufacturers. We see the onslaught and the ongoing increase of ransomware as a service on the dark web, meaning that ransomware criminal groups are now providing ransomware as a service to other criminals on the dark web, and they basically provide the creation of the ransomware, the sourcing of the list, the deployment of the ransomware, and then the sharing of the proceeds from the ransom with anybody that's willing to pay them to do so. So there's a massive increase in ransomware attacks, and then there's ongoing evolution of malware and various other types of Trojans. There are various technologies, malwares, Trojans, etc., that are being developed on the dark web that are being designed to sneak past defenses and to overcome or push through new cybersecurity technologies that organizations are trying to deploy. So again, organizations are trying to figure out, well, how do we proactively get ahead of this? How do we not become a victim, and how do we control our own destiny? At the same time, we're dealing with attack and ransom escalation. Ransomware gangs are now extorting and threatening victims and communicating and telling the victims, we will call your business partners, your suppliers, and your customers, and we will tell them that you have been infected with ransomware and we have control of their data unless you pay this ransom. There's also new ransom extortion schemes where you're not just being held for one ransom. The cyber criminals and the hackers are holding you for multiple different ransom types. So just when you think that you've paid the ransom, the cyber criminals come back and say, well, now you have to pay the ransom for this, or now you have to pay the ransom to get the data back. Now you have to pay the ransom to shut us up so we don't communicate that you've been breached. So there's all types of different ransom and extortion schemes that are now being driven in the market. And this is escalation that we're seeing. As of April, there were over 1 billion records breached. globally. And again, that's a massive increase over the same time last year. We've all heard about the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack and the fact that the dark side group, cyber criminal group, was associated with that attack. And the reality is, it doesn't really matter what industry you're in. JBS, which was a meat supplier, was held for ransom recently, reportedly paid $11 million to try to resolve the ransomware attack. So just in summary, massive increase in cyber attacks over the last 12 to 24 months. Many organizations and industries have seen between 200% and 3,000% an increase in attacks and breaches, and ransomware continues to dominate and destroy organizations and is wreaking havoc with organizations across all industries across the world. If you take a look at the top cyber attacks by industries, these are the top 7 industries with incidents, and these were the top 7 organizations or industries that reported breaches. So again, it doesn't matter if you're a small organization, if you're a large organization, and this is right out of the Verizon data breach report, but you are being attacked, and this is what's really causing governments and industry regulators to tighten down and make more changes in terms of regulations. These are IT realities that we're all faced. And these are realities that sometimes impact or slow the deployment of a proactive security program within organizations. Research out there shows that over 70% of IT projects actually fail in deployment. 55% of project managers are citing budget overrun as the primary reason for project failure. The lack of clear goals and flawed requirements are often the most common factors for project failure at 37%. And 44% of projects fail due to a lack of alignment between business and IT project objectives. And then 62% of successful projects had executive sponsorship. So if you think about these realities, when you're in terms of IT projects, just in general, when you're deploying a cybersecurity compliance program or technology, or a cybersecurity or a compliance set of technologies or a program, all of these realities still apply, right? So you're still faced with a significant disadvantage in terms of project success. So over the years, we've seen a lot of cybersecurity and a lot of compliance programs and technologies fail in terms of deployment for these core reasons. Now, we're also dealing with just IT system and IT application downtime. And a lot of times the downtime is driven by human error or cyber attack or software and equipment failure. But here's the reality. Designing, building, operating, maintaining, and supporting business IT systems, security systems, compliance systems, and programs is a very time-consuming, costly, and complex task. It requires specialized skills, robust project management, and executive involvement and oversight in order to be successful. So the odds are against most organizations who attempt to drive these programs internally without any type of internal or external support. Now, we've done a lot of research and studies on what are the gaps that prevent organizations or slow organizations from deploying a proactive security and compliance program. And one of the top gaps that we see is goals and objectives. So business IT security and compliance goals and objectives are often misaligned within organizations, or they're not understood across all the various groups and stakeholders within the business. Oftentimes, these business IT and security and compliance initiatives and projects compete with other spending priorities that are really not aligned or understood by various stakeholders and the executives. And then oftentimes we find that business and IT and security and compliance projects don't have clear alignment around or with organization goals and objectives. So these are things that will absolutely slow your organization down from deploying a proactive security or compliance program and staying ahead of the rate of change that we're seeing in the marketplace. We see a slow evolving or lack of evolving program maturity. So IT, cybersecurity, regulatory compliance program. The current state of the IT security or the compliance program and its maturity level and how effective it is often misunderstood, or it's not even quantified. We also see that in these organizations that struggle with this, that the IT, the security, the compliance team effectiveness, and that staff's actual capabilities is oftentimes unknown or misunderstood by the leadership team. So there's a lack of expectation and there's a lack of visibility in terms of what are the tools, technologies, resources, and skills that are really required to make sure that your systems, applications, and your sensitive data are not just secured and they're not just patched and updated, but they're actually protected based upon regulatory compliance standards. We also see that IT, cybersecurity, and compliance team functionality or system functionality is often misunderstood by the leadership team. And this is caused by vendors coming in and basically pitching features and functions of technologies and systems before they even understand the goals and objectives and the requirements of the client. Spend alignment. We see a lack of spend alignment between the business, IT security, and compliance investments. We oftentimes see a lack of resources and investment in a lack of investment in teams and skills as well. So again, this goes back to lack of alignment with goals and objectives, lack of understanding in terms of where the program is at and where your people and your capabilities are at, and then how much you need to invest. So IT and security investment and project return on investment is often not tracked. Organizations struggle with quantifying the value and impact of IT investments, security, and compliance investments. And again, it's really because there's a lack of alignment with goals, objectives, expectations, and spending. And then lastly, we see that many organizations lack IT security and compliance initiative and project KPIs and metrics. So they don't know what to measure or how to metric the investment or the project or the initiatives. And they struggle with tracking the effectiveness and the value. So vendors, partners, suppliers of IT security and compliance solutions are reviewed and assessed and ranked in terms of the value that they provide to the business. We see this as a massive gap. We see most organizations don't have a solid framework or a best practice for assessing and ranking and prioritizing solutions and vendors based upon their business goals and objectives. So when you're deploying a proactive security and compliance program, these are areas that you can invest in that will help you fast track the deployment of those programs. Number one, assessments. So IT, business, security, and compliance assessments will help you to identify where your organization is currently at with the use of technology, with your policies and procedures in your program. Provide you with a current state analysis of where you're at and compares that to where you need to be. Doing IT, network, security, compliance assessments, penetration testing, vulnerability scanning, risk assessments. Those are a great value because they provide you with a scorecard and a gap analysis around technologies, process, procedures, and capabilities so you know where to invest and how to evolve your program and what your roadmap is to become compliant. So a lot of organizations look for IT, security, and compliance project reviews. They look for outside vendors and subject matter experts to come in to take a look at their organization, assess their organization, and then do the review of their spending, of their projects, of their priorities, and then provide recommendations on how more effectively to spend their money and how to get more value out of those investments. Investing in the program. So creating or updating an IT system, a data usage, your access policies, your procedures, your controls. Policies and procedures and controls are just as important as technology. A lot of business email compromise, a lot of fraud, and a lot of ransomware remediation responses or strategies can be driven proactively by having the right policies and procedures or emergency response or incident response policy and procedure and control plan in place. So technology is not going to stop 100% of the risks and the threats and the attacks. So you need to invest in policies and procedures. Off payroll, virtual IT, virtual security, or virtual compliance subject matter experts, or VCIOs, VCSOs, are being hired by organizations because those off payroll consultants can come in a fractional retainer based mode to take a look at the IT security or the compliance program and then help those organizations to put the right controls, policies, procedures, and technologies in place. So many organizations are looking to partner with an MSP or a service provider or an outsourcer around security as a compliance, IT as a service. So security as a service, compliance as a service, IT as a service uh, uh, provider. So some type of compliance as a service, security as a service offering. If they have some type of MSP, managed services offering, most organizations are moving in that direction to help accelerate the development of their program. A lot of organizations are investing in training and awareness. So IT security and system awareness training. They're doing phishing simulations, end user system and process adoption simulations. So they're not just simulating phishing, but they're actually doing tabletop exercises and doing simulations on how to respond to a phish, how to respond to a ransomware attack, how to respond if the company is actually breached. Who are you going to call? Who are you going to report to? What does that escalation process look like? There's also management training that's required around that. So management and employee training on data usage, system usage, how to respond in a disaster or in a ransomware scenario, right? And then how to respond to internal attacks or espionage or external threats and attacks. So many organizations are tapping service providers that provide managed phishing or managed training services and solutions. Lastly, most organizations are looking at some type of managed detection and response service so they can get 24 by 7 monitoring, so they can get detection and response support from a third party when they don't have the internal team or the resources or the technology to invest in this. And those organizations recommend a layered approach to security. So investigate cybersecurity insurance. Take a look at endpoint protection. So you want to harden the laptops, the devices, the mobile phones that are being used to communicate with your internal systems and to communicate with customers. You want to look at data encryption. So encrypting the data on those devices. So whether it's being stored or data encryption in flight. Most organizations are investing in next generation firewalls. So the old firewalls and the old technologies have been proven ineffective at tracking and providing automated security response to some of the recent threats and attacks. And then a lot of organizations are trying to figure out, well, how do we prevent data loss and data exfiltration in the first place? We were looking at a study the other day, and it said, 17 plus% of all employees have access to sensitive data within their employer environment. Network monitoring services, so a NOC, Network Operations Center. Do you have an organization or a capability internally to look at network traffic, to look at anomalous behavior, to identify suspicious behavior or attacks and threats in real time? Investing in a penetration test is a great thing, or a vulnerability scan is a great thing because it exposes and shows you the vulnerabilities within your environment. But that's like looking in the rearview mirror behind you. What you want to do is invest in looking through the front window of the car so you can see what's happening in real time. And that's where managed detection and response comes in, and that's where network monitoring services come in, because they provide you real-time visibility and a view in terms of what's happening in your systems and on your network right now. And those services help you to prevent and shut down threats and attacks, and then respond accordingly to those attacks. When we survey our customers and we do market research, this is what we find. Over 55% of MSPs like us and our peers are reporting that most or all of our clients are asking for cybersecurity related services. Meeting security risks is the top needs of the majority of our customers and other MSP customers. The managed security market is going to continue to grow. It's actually going to grow to over 50 billion in the next handful of years. And at the same time, research is showing that over 83% of internal security teams working for corporations are experiencing alert fatigue, which means that they can't keep up with the amount of threats and attacks and alerts, and they have challenges managing the core security information and event monitoring platforms and security technologies that they bought. So this is driving over 32% of organizations to increase their usage of outside service providers, and 75% of MSPs like us report that their clients are struggling to keep up with regulatory compliance. Now, some other interesting facts that have been shared with us through these interviews and this research. Clients overwhelmingly want and expect their MSPs to be knowledgeable, to be proactive, to be highly responsive, and to be committed to adding value and committed to the client's goals and objectives. In terms of being knowledgeable, clients expect MSPs to know about their business, to learn about their business. They want to understand infrastructure, business process, employee preferences, and they want MSPs to modify their communication and their alerts to fit their business and to fit their requirements, because they don't want to be spammed with communication or spammed with information that's not valuable or relevant to their business or their clients, employees, or their industry. Clients want organizations and MSPs to be proactive. They expect MSPs to inquire about their business, their goals, objectives, and their requirements. They expect the MSP to verify these goals, objectives, and their expectations back to the customers to make sure that they're in alignment. And they expect MSPs to proactively reach out to schedule conversations, updates, review trends and risks, and provide greater insight into what's happening in their business and what's happening in their industry to those clients. At the end of the day, clients want MSPs to be responsive to tickets, to requests. Even if they can't resolve a ticket or a request or an outage or an issue, clients expect to be notified and updated in terms of progress. They want document and review service and solution enhancement requests to be tracked and communicated back, and they expect a closed-loop resolution process to be in place. At the end of the day, clients want their MSPs to be committed. They want their service providers to establish goals, objectives, KPIs, and metrics that they can use to monitor and manage and track the effectiveness, quantify the value associated with that service. And they want their MSP to establish reporting, communication, and recurring meetings and discussion topics that add value to the client. So these are some of the top needs and asks that customers have of MSPs. And that fits into how does an MSP and a solution provider help an organization to deploy a proactive security program or a proactive compliance program or set of technologies to support those programs. Tech Isle did a fantastic bit of research with small, medium-sized business and enterprises. And this is an example, a snippet from that research. They're saying in 2021, most organizations are focused on addressing these key business issues. Number one, increasing business growth. Number two, driving profitability. Developing an IT outsourcing strategy, improving workforce productivity, quality of products and services, and accelerating speed to market. So these are all business goals and objectives or issues that most organizations are trying to figure out. At the same time, most organizations are trying to get their arms around cloud, how to leverage cloud, how to modernize their collaboration systems, their communication systems, to drive greater employee engagement and greater customer engagement. So they're looking for mobility, remote hybrid workplace solutions, and right underneath that is security. And right underneath that is analytics and managed services. So these are top IT priorities that the majority of organizations are looking for. But the challenges that they face are many. So they're trying to figure out, do they maintain current IT infrastructure? In the industry, we call that technical debt. So how much technical debt are you going to keep versus moving to the cloud or removing that technical debt, erasing that debt, and starting fresh? They're also trying to figure out what are the various data sources that we need to integrate so we can drive greater collaboration, so we can make better business decisions. And at the same time, they're trying to figure out, how do we modernize IT? How do we move from where we're at today to deploy a more agile, more responsive, more value-added IT model? IT systems, phone systems, right? Server, storage, networking, Wi-Fi, business applications, back office applications. Organizations are looking at the entire stack, and they're trying to figure out, how do we modernize and move forward and accelerate through that process? At the same time, they need to deploy customer experience solutions. So technologies, methods, practices, et cetera, that pull the market to them and create a tighter relationship. And at the same time, they have to protect their data. They have to drive business continuity, disaster recovery plans. So they need backups. Again, they need to figure out, what are they going to do in a disaster? What's the emergency response plan? If they're held for ransom, how do they reinstall the data? How do they get the data back? And then at the same time, they're trying to figure out how to manage data growth. Now, most organizations can't afford to hire a complete staff or invest in all of these technologies at the same time. So that's where a third-party service provider comes in and says, hey, we'll help you to prioritize these investments, and we'll show you a way to create the biggest bang for the buck. And so this is an open invitation for organizations to experience exceptional value. As a leading and award-winning managed service provider that's been around for over 15 years, we've helped hundreds of organizations across dozens of different regulated industries with operational monitoring, with managed services, with architecture, with configuration, with implementation of new technologies. We've expanded our capabilities and our offerings to include managed security services, managed regulatory compliance services. And then we augment those services with virtual CIO and virtual staff who can come in and help to build the programs, the policies, the procedures, et cetera, and not have to charge you the same as a full-time, fully burdened employee. At the same time, we have fantastic advanced IT consulting and advisory and architectural engineering services to bring to bear. So a full service organization, and just as an example of something that we just introduced, is our new Compliance Manager, Compliance as a Service program. So over the last 15 years, we've built a great reputation as being a collaborative, innovative, managed IT service provider. And as I've mentioned, we're starting to roll out new products and services. So Compliance Manager is a compliance as a service solution that provides quarterly scanning and reporting for various regulations and compliance frameworks, such as the California Consumer Privacy Act, CCPA, CMMC, HIPAA, GDPR, ISO, and also it helps you to assess your organization, put the policies and procedures in place for your organization that adhere to cybersecurity insurance. So Compliance Manager is customized to fit your business, your industry, and your compliance needs. And it includes an annual Compliance Manager subscription. We help set up and install the application and the systems and the technologies. We help to perform the quarterly scans. We provide assessment report readouts. So we invest time with your team. We walk them through the results of the assessment, and then you get access to policies, procedures, evidence of compliance documents, and other associated tools and resources and worksheets that you need to address your regulatory compliance needs and to advance your compliance and your security program forward. So the other value-added thing about Compliance Manager is it's actually used to track the implementation of any remediation activities or corrective actions. So now you have an audit trail. So if you have to have an auditor come in, right? Let's just say PCI, if you're concerned with payment card industry standards or HIPAA or CCPA or CMMC or some other type of regulatory compliance, and you're going to be assessed or audited, this gives you the evidence that's required for that audit and that assessment. So this is a proactive compliance program that reduces the risk, cost, and time associated with regulatory compliance management, and it will help you to deploy a proactive security and compliance program. So this is just an example of the various modules, compliance modules, that are included in the program. Again, that can be customized for your business. And organizations can purchase this solution, Compliance Manager solution standalone. You can bundle it with another security as a service solution that we have that provides risk assessments, penetration tests, vulnerability scans, and managed detection and response services. Or you can bundle this with a standard managed services contract like Exceptional Care that provides help desk managed services, infrastructure, server storage, networking, telephony managed services, etc. So these are all some of the advancements that we're driving into the marketplace as exceptional. And just to wrap up, most of the executives we speak to are looking for ways to proactively reduce cybersecurity and compliance risk, and they're looking to cut cost or manage costs. But based on the glut of IT technologies, compliance and cybersecurity technologies that are out there in the market, and with the glut of vendors, most organizations really don't know who to turn to. So the reality is the amount of time, energy, effort, and resources required for organizations of any and all sizes to keep their IT systems, their back office applications updated, patched, secured, and to make sure that sensitive data is constantly protected based upon regulatory standards, the amount of effort required and cost associated with that is significant. Exceptional's proactive, superior cybersecurity and regulatory compliance programs can definitely help with this. So, as a leading award-winning provider of managed IT services, networking, and security solutions, we're here and we're committed to help. So we want to help organizations to reduce risk and align their IT systems and their applications and their IT services to the needs of the business and the needs of their customers, employees, and partners. So embrace the exceptional experience today. Visit our website and contact us. We have a lot of free resources available. Take a look at our free ebooks and our research around cybersecurity compliance and IT best practices on our website. And request a complimentary network assessment or security assessment and email us at info@exceptional.com. Thank you so much for the time today. Be on the lookout for additional webinars that we will be having in the next 30 to 45 days. Thank you.